There comes a moment, quiet, still, almost unnoticed by the world, when a woman's heart trembles with a truth too deep to ignore. She doesn't post about it. She doesn't call anyone to confess it. She just feels it. This is that moment, the moment she starts to regret the breakup. And my friend, I'm here to tell you, it is not what you say, not what you post, not how strong you seem. It is what God does in the silence of your absence that begins to stir her soul. This is why you need to hear this whole message. Because if you're questioning whether she's thinking about you, if you wonder whether she regrets it all, then know this: you may already be in the moment she'll never forget. At first, she was confident. The decision was made. She spoke it with resolve, maybe even a smile. But that confidence was temporary. It was born of emotion, not conviction. And time, oh how time exposes the truth. Time doesn't lie. You see, when you stopped chasing, when you stopped trying to prove your worth, something shifted. Your silence became louder than all your pleas. Your growth became more radiant than all your old efforts. And now, she's beginning to see what she once overlooked. The late nights aren't so peaceful. The days aren't so full. There's a shadow now, a quiet emptiness, where your presence once was. You were not just a person in her life. You were a covering. Your consistency, your attention, your kindness, maybe it wasn't perfect, but it was real. She remembers now. She remembers how safe she felt. She remembers how your words calmed her storms. And though she might have convinced herself that being free meant being stronger, now she begins to see that freedom without purpose becomes loneliness. That is where the regret begins, not out of desperation, but revelation. Regret is not always loud. It doesn't always arrive in the form of a message or a call. Sometimes it hides in the quiet scroll through your old photos. Sometimes it reveals itself when she sees someone else with less intention than you had. And sometimes it screams when she realizes the world is full of options, but very few connections like yours. She remembers your prayers. She remembers your patience. And deep down, she begins to understand what she walked away from wasn't just a man. It was favor. It was something sent, not just something found. And while you may still wrestle with the pain of what happened, let me encourage you today. Your healing is not just for you. It's a testimony in the making. You becoming stronger, wiser, more focused. That is not in vain. Because when God starts to stir hearts, He starts with memory. He lets her remember who you really were. And that memory, when met with your transformation, becomes a mirror. She doesn't see the old you anymore. She sees the man she thought she could walk away from, but now realizes was a gift she couldn't truly replace. Let her wrestle with that moment. Let her feel the weight of what was lost. Not to punish her, but because sometimes regret is the only path back to truth. And you don't need to reach out. You don't need to chase her down. Because if it's real, she'll come to her senses. And if not, you still rise. You still move forward. Because you are not just someone she lost. You are someone God is refining. And when the time is right, whether with her or someone better, God will write the next chapter. So now stand strong, walk in grace, and know this moment, this quiet, holy moment, might just be the one she'll never escape. Not because of what you did, but because of who you've become. And that, my friend, is when regret is born, not out of guilt, but out of clarity. This is the moment she starts to regret the breakup. And it's not your job to remind her, it's your journey that will. There's a stillness that speaks louder than any voice. And in that stillness, something begins to shift in her heart. This moment of realization doesn't happen during the chaos, not when the words are flying or when pride is standing tall. It happens after the dust has settled, when the adrenaline fades and silence replaces all the noise. It's in the quiet spaces of her life, Maybe late at night when the world slows down and her soul starts to speak, that she begins to truly feel what she walked away from. She scrolls through her memories, not just the pictures on her phone, but the memories etched into her spirit. The way you laughed, the way you looked at her when she didn't know anyone was watching, the prayers you whispered over her when she didn't feel strong. These things start to echo back to her not because she wants them to, but because something within her has begun to miss what she thought she could replace. She might be surrounded by people, even by new faces, but something is missing. And that something isn't just anyone, it's you. It's the version of love that held her without asking for anything back. It's the warmth that wasn't perfect, but was present. She remembers your silence. That's what cuts deeper than any words ever could. You didn't chase when she left. You didn't beg. You didn't throw accusations. You let her walk away, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. And now, that silence speaks to her louder than any apology. Because while she tried to move forward, you chose to grow. While she distracted herself, you refined yourself. And that quiet maturity, unspoken, unseen, is now echoing back to her. It's not about the ego. It's not about winning. It's about what happens in her when she sees that you didn't crumble. You rose, you focused, you surrendered your pain to a higher purpose. And in doing that, something began to stir in her. Not because you manipulated her, not because you tried to get her back, but because your transformation became a testimony she couldn't deny. And now she sits with that tension. She might not admit it out loud. She might still try to keep up appearances. But deep within her, she's questioning her choice. Not because you're asking her to, but because her soul is unsettled. That's the power of a real connection. It doesn't fade just because someone walked away. And the moment of realization is sacred. It's not manufactured. It's divine. It comes with a weight that no one else can carry for her. She has to face it. And when she does, the regret that follows isn't about control or possession. It's about awakening. An awakening to what she had, what she lost, and what she might never find again in the same way. There is a certain tragedy in only understanding the value of something after it's gone. We live in a world obsessed with the next thing, the next person, the next feeling, the next high. But there are some things that cannot be duplicated, replaced, or rushed. What she failed to see in the moment was not your perfection, but your presence. She mistook your stability for predictability. She took the kindness you gave daily and filed it away as expected, not extraordinary. And now, as she navigates life without you, the unseen value of what she walked away from begins to reveal itself. It doesn't hit her all at once. It builds slowly, piece by piece, in the spaces where you used to stand. It's in the quiet mornings where no one checks on her soul, in the long days where no voice speaks life into her spirit, and in the moments where she feels vulnerable, but no one offers her the kind of strength you once did. That's when it begins. An ache that cannot be satisfied by surface-level affection or temporary distractions. She didn't see the prayers you prayed over her behind closed doors. She didn't see the mental battles you fought just to protect her peace. She didn't fully recognize the way you sacrificed, not loudly, not with demands, but with quiet, consistent love. The world tells us love is loud, flashy, exciting, but real love is patient. Real love is steady. Real love shows up when no one else wants to. And now, in your absence, that truth is beginning to shine brighter than any new connection she tries to form. She sees the difference, not in comparison but in contrast. Where others flatter, you protected. Where others entertained, you anchored. And that depth doesn't disappear simply because the relationship ended. It lingers, it haunts. It reminds her in ways she didn't expect. The value of your presence was never about how much you gave her materially or how often you said the right things. It was in the consistency of your spirit. It was in the way you never made her feel like a burden, And now, every time she looks for that same comfort elsewhere and finds it missing, it pulls her back to you. Not physically, perhaps, but emotionally and spiritually. The memory of what she lost becomes louder than the excitement of what she chased, because what she had with you was rooted, and what she seeks now is fleeting. The contrast is undeniable, and for the first time, she begins to see clearly. Not through the lens of pride or pain, but through the eyes of reflection. She remembers the overlooked moments. She replays the conversations she once dismissed. She recalls how you listened when she had nothing to offer but silence. And in those reflections, she begins to understand. She had something rare, and she let it go before she truly knew what it was. In the beginning, she wore her strength like a crown. The decision to walk away felt bold, even empowering. She told herself it was right. She may have told others it was necessary. And for a while, that belief held her up. She moved forward with her head high, maybe even with a sense of pride that she had the courage to choose herself. But what no one sees in those early moments of separation is the slow unraveling that takes place beneath the surface. Because strength, when it's built on emotion rather than truth, eventually turns into weight. The very thing she thought made her free begins to bind her. The silence that once felt peaceful now feels cold. The independence that once felt like liberation now feels like loneliness. And that's when her strength, the very posture she took to move on, becomes her burden. She told herself she had outgrown the relationship. She may have even believed she was doing you both a favor by ending it. But the heart has a way of catching up with the decisions the mind made too quickly. What once felt like clarity becomes clouded with memories. What once seemed like empowerment becomes a daily struggle to pretend she doesn't feel the ache of something missing. And that ache grows heavier when she realizes it wasn't just a person she walked away from. It was the covering, the safety, the emotional refuge that you gave her without asking for anything in return. She begins to see that not every breakup is a step forward. Sometimes it's a retreat into fear, into the illusion that love shouldn't require effort or grace. And now, as time passes, her strength begins to falter, not in public, not where the world can see, but in the quiet places where she faces herself honestly. There is a cost to pretending. The smile in public, the laughter with friends, the curated life online. It all requires energy. And every day, it takes more out of her to maintain the image that she's fine. Because deep down, her heart is remembering what her pride forced her to forget. You didn't just love her. You stood by her. You spoke life over her. You challenged her without belittling her. You covered her in ways she didn't fully appreciate until now. And when she left, she thought she was choosing strength. But now she realizes she was choosing solitude disguised as empowerment. That strength was temporary. It was emotional armor that cracked under the weight of time. Now her burden is not just missing you. It's the realization that the decision she thought would bring peace has brought restlessness. She carries it alone because to admit it would be to admit she was wrong, and pride is a cruel master. It keeps her from reaching out, even as her heart begs her to reconsider. So she walks on, not in freedom, but in the weight of the choice she made, slowly realizing that strength without wisdom is not strength at all. She won't talk about it. She won't admit it out loud. But deep within her, she compares. Not out of spite, not to diminish anyone else, but because her heart is wired to remember. And memory doesn't ask permission. It just arrives. She meets new people, maybe even smiles at new faces, and at first, it feels like possibility. It feels like moving forward. But sooner or later, something shifts. Maybe it's in the way someone else speaks to her. Maybe it's in the way they don't listen, or the way their energy feels shallow when she was used to depth. And suddenly, comparison begins to rise, uninvited but unrelenting. She begins to think of you. Not just the things you did, but the way you made her feel. How you looked her in the eyes when she doubted herself. How you sat in silence with her when words couldn't reach the pain. How you led with calm when her world felt like a storm. That kind of connection doesn't just disappear. It lingers, and it begins to cast shadows on everything new. This comparison doesn't mean she regrets every part of leaving. It doesn't even mean she's ready to come back. But what it does mean is that the reality of who you were to her is becoming clearer than it was before. At the time, maybe she thought it was ordinary. Maybe your patience and your presence felt like things she could find again with someone else. But now, the weight of what you gave her is becoming more evident. And what she once dismissed as normal now looks sacred in hindsight. She remembers your consistency. She remembers how you made her laugh when she didn't want to smile. She remembers the way you understood what she meant, even when she couldn't say it. And every new interaction becomes a mirror, reflecting what you were and what others aren't. The heart is stubborn when it knows what it's missing. It tries to fill the gap with replacements, hoping something new can recreate something old. But true connection is not manufactured. It's rare. And as much as she may try to move on, her spirit compares, not because she wants to go backward, but because her heart is measuring what's in front of her against what once felt like home. You weren't perfect, but you were intentional. You didn't always say the right things, but your heart was always in the right place. And now, in the stillness of her reflection, she sees that. She feels that. It creeps in slowly when no one's looking. It whispers when she least expects it. It's in the way someone else tries to impress her and fails to connect. It's in the way others show up with charm, but no character. And in those moments, she's not comparing because she's holding on. She's comparing because she's waking up to what she let go of. The silent comparison is relentless. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare or drama. It simply exists, quietly measuring every conversation, every interaction, every glance against the foundation you once built with her. And no matter how hard she tries to ignore it, deep inside, she knows when something just doesn't feel like you. At first, your silence was expected. Maybe she assumed it was temporary, a reaction, something you'd break eventually. She may have even waited for it, checking her phone with a flicker of anticipation, expecting a message that never came. But days turned to weeks, and the silence remained. And slowly, something happened. That silence, once easily dismissed, began to grow in volume. Not in sound, but in meaning. Because when someone is truly present, their absence is not a gap, it is a declaration. Your silence didn't mean you didn't care. It meant you were done proving your worth to someone who no longer chose to see it. And now, every moment you don't reach out, every day you don't chase her, becomes a message far louder than any words you could have spoken. There is a power in absence that presence can't always hold. When you were around, she may have taken you for granted. The calls, the texts, the small acts of love, all of it became familiar, maybe even routine. But now, stripped of your energy, your encouragement, your loyalty, she's left with the realization of what you used to give so freely. She doesn't hear your voice, but she feels your lack. She doesn't see your name on her screen, but she senses the weight of that space. And that void starts to speak. It reminds her of the warmth she once felt knowing you were just a message away. It reminds her of how secure she felt having someone consistently there, even in silence. Now she notices the absence of that safety, that emotional covering she didn't know she needed until it was gone. Your absence isn't revenge. It isn't bitterness. It's growth. It's you refusing to interrupt your healing just to prove you still care. It's you understanding that sometimes love means letting go, not to give up, but to honor yourself enough to stop bleeding for someone who no longer reaches for you. And in that space, where you would have once filled the air with reassurance, there is now nothing but stillness. But it's not empty. It's full of purpose. It's filled with the echo of every moment you stood by her, every sacrifice you made, every word you didn't say but always showed. And that echo rings louder each time she faces something alone that she once faced with you. She might not admit it. She might still post, still laugh, still pretend. But absence has a way of peeling back the layers, because eventually the performance ends and reality sets in. And the reality is, your absence is a voice that doesn't stop speaking. It reminds her of who you were without having to say anything at all. You don't have to remind her of the late-night talks, the prayers, the peace you carried into her life. She remembers. She just never thought the day would come when she'd feel the full weight of you not being there. There's a phrase people cling to after heartbreak. Time heals all wounds. It's comforting. It's repeated often. And it offers the illusion that if you wait long enough, the ache will fade and clarity will come. And maybe she believed that too. Maybe in the early days after the breakup, she told herself that in a few weeks or months, the emotions would settle and the missing pieces would fall into place. But time doesn't heal what's not truly surrendered. Time doesn't mend what's never confronted. And as the calendar pages turned, she began to realize something that quietly disturbed her. She wasn't healing. She was only hardening. She looked strong to the world. She got back to her routine, surrounded herself with distractions, leaned into the noise. But late at night, when there were no more voices and no more screens to hide behind, the truth started to whisper to her. It wasn't better. It wasn't easier. It wasn't healed. Because time, by itself, doesn't bring closure. Truth does. Accountability does. And more than anything, honesty does. And the honest truth she began to face was that she missed something real, something sacred, something that, in her quest to move on, she never really dealt with. Your absence didn't shrink, it grew. Your voice in her memory didn't fade, it echoed louder. And all the things she thought would disappear with time started to revisit her, not as pain, but as reminders of love's depth and rarity. Healing only comes when the heart is honest, and her heart, as much as it wanted to, could not lie to her forever. She might have found moments of distraction, even glimpses of happiness, but deep down, a silent emptiness followed her. One that no new face, no new place, no temporary comfort could truly fill. Because when you've been truly seen, truly loved, and genuinely protected, you can't just forget that. You can't replace that kind of presence with a duplicate. And now, instead of time healing her, time began to confront her. It forced her to reflect. It made her sit with the choices she made not out of strength, but out of emotion. And that reflection didn't bring peace. It brought regret. She started to realize that the man she left wasn't perfect, but he was real. He had flaws, but he had vision. He wasn't always right, but his heart was consistent. And that kind of love, unpolished but true, is rare in a world that values appearance over substance. Time didn't dull that memory. It sharpened it. It brought it into focus. She saw what you were becoming. She noticed how you didn't fall apart. And somewhere along the line, she realized that she might have walked away from a love that would have stood the test of time, because she didn't give time the chance to reveal what it was meant to build. And so, here we are, at the crossroads of silence and realization, memory and maturity, strength and surrender. What began as her decision to walk away has now become a journey inward. It's no longer just about what she left, but what she's beginning to understand about herself, about love, and about the weight of choices made in haste. You didn't chase her. You didn't beg. You didn't fight for a space you already filled with integrity. You chose stillness, growth, faith. And in doing so, you allowed space for the truth to do what pleading never could. This is the moment she starts to regret the breakup, not because she lost you in the eyes of the world, but because she's realizing what she gave up in the silence of her own soul. She sees now that love was never about grand gestures or loud declarations. It was in your quiet consistency, your sacrificial spirit, your unwavering presence. And that kind of love, it doesn't knock twice with the same voice. Let this be your reminder. Your value isn't determined by who stays or who walks away. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is letting someone feel the absence of what they took for granted. And in that absence, a new clarity rises, not just for her, but for you. You didn't lose her. You found yourself. And in finding yourself, you became the man who no longer needs to convince anyone of his worth. May that truth lead you in peace. May that growth guide you forward. And if ever the path brings her back, you'll meet her not in the place of pain, but in the place of purpose, stronger, wiser, and rooted in a love that began the moment you chose to let go with dignity. This is where her regret begins and your freedom continues.